Greeting you through the static of the airwaves. From the Great Plains, my name is Chance, and you're tuned in to the Mystery Report. I would like to extend my appreciation for your tuning in to the flagship episode of this podcast. As promised in our previously uploaded channel introduction, today's episode is going to focus on some of the most well-known cryptids haunting our wilderness: Wendigos, Skinwalkers, and everybody's favorite, pale crawlers. I would like to focus primarily on exploring the backgrounds and lore behind these entities, and hope to present an episode that will not only leave you with goosebumps, but also leave you with some more information on these terrifying creatures. So cozy up to the fire with your hot beverage, keep your spare trousers handy, and prepare to be enthralled by the Mystery Report. Jumping right into the first in our trifecta of cryptids this evening, we will be discussing the Wendigo. Many of you who have been within the spheres of paranormal circles and have an interest in such phenomena are apt to recognize the name. The Wendigo is described varyingly as a mythological creature or malevolent spirit, whose origins lie in the legends and lore of various groups of indigenous North American peoples. More specifically, this legend can be geographically traced to areas roughly straddling the US-Canadian border, stretching from the Great Plains of the US, where I call home, to the Great Lakes, and to the eastern coastal forests of Canada. The through line and one of the connections between the tribes that share this legend is their use of the Algonquin family of languages. As such, there are many variations in pronunciations and transliterations of the term Wendigo, such as Wendigo, Wendigo, Wendiga, Wendigoo, and so on. As previously mentioned, there are two prevailing descriptions of this entity, one being that it is more akin to a malevolent spirit. This spirit is said to have the ability to possess or assert influence over humans, causing them to feel intense hunger or greed, and even conferring the desire to partake in cannibalism. The other prevailing representation is something more corporeal. It is often described as a giant humanoid, although the physical descriptions in Native American lore do not contain some of the major traits that have become synonymous with modern depictions. If you were to go to your computer and search Wendigo, you would see a wealth of images presenting this entity as more animalistic, often meshing attributes of deer or elk with wolves or bears and the like, and almost always with antlers or horns. Interestingly enough, this depiction is something whose origins can be traced back to a 1910 novella simply titled The Wendigo. This tale was written by one Algernon Blackwood, and the description of the creature given in it became a cornerstone of 20th century media portrayals, despite the fact that it differs significantly from traditional lore on the subject. This 20th century portrayal would then be further distilled into the 21st century depiction to which we have become accustomed. For an accurate description of this entity, we can look at accounts by folks within the Native American community. Basil H. Johnston, an Ojibwe scholar and teacher who was located in Ontario, Canada, described the Wendigo as follows. The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones. With its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets, the Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had were tattered and bloody. Unclean and suffering from suppuration of the flesh, the Wendigo gave off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. In my mind, I draw similar parallels to ghouls of other folklore. But what is interesting to know is that the Wendigo seems to be more closely related to humans, and the animalistic representations that have become common are something of an extrapolation from the original lore. Cannibalism is a term that is almost always used in describing these entities, coupled with attributes of greed and gluttony. These creatures are also often associated with winter, and victims who have purported to have been in their presence often describe an unseasonable chill that accompanies them. All of these factors play into the theory by many scholars that Wendigos are to be taken as a metaphor for the concept of famine. If one looks to the areas where these tribes reside, they will find that the winters there are quite harsh, and famine and starvation was something not uncommon to their ancestors. For these reasons, people interpret the Wendigo as being a cautionary tale against succumbing to cannibalism during hard times, and indeed to generally not be greedy or gluttonous with your resources. In fact, amongst some of the tribes who believe in the Wendigo, one of the ways that they are created is when a person has to partake in cannibalism due to starvation. In the winter of 1878 to 1879, a horrifying event took place that has been attributed to the Wendigo. There was a man from the Cree tribe whose name was Kakisi Kutchin, although he was often called Swift Runner. He moved his family into the woods through the winter, although when spring came and he ventured back out, his family was not with him. He stumbled into a Catholic mission nearby and proclaimed that his whole family had succumbed to starvation and were dead. There was instant suspicion, however, because it had been noted how Swift Runner appeared to be in good health. While staying with the priests, he was described as suffering from nightmares that would cause him to scream intensely in the middle of the night. And on one occasion, he was even accused of trying to lead a group of children deep into the woods. The priests became convinced that something was not right with this man, and they went to the authorities, who arrested Swift Runner on suspicion that he had killed his family. He was ordered to take them to the site where they had been staying through the winter, and indeed what awaited them there proved such suspicion. All that remained of his family were bones, many of which had been snapped in half and hollowed out, presumably because someone had sucked the marrow clean out of them. Apparently, they also discovered a pot that contained human fat. Swift Runner went on to claim that he had been possessed by the spirit of a Wendigo, which had caused him to commit the atrocity of cannibalizing his family. A trial was held, and the jury found him guilty, after which he was hanged. I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about the origins and traditional representations of this now famous cryptid. I would encourage you to look into it more, as I have only begun to scratch the surface of this fascinating Native American entity. And I leave it up to you to decide, is this a mere allegory, or could there be one lurking in the woods near you right now? The second entity we will be discussing in tonight's episode is the enigmatic Skinwalker. But before we get into it, I would like to give a little background about myself. I was born in the northwestern portion of the state of New Mexico, very near the Navajo Nation Native American Reservation. And although I personally do not have any Navajo heritage to speak of, I have always had a fascination with the legends and lore of Navajo culture, having heard many tales about them while growing up in the Four Corners region. I have always found the landscape in that part of the country breathtaking, and I do feel that there is a palpable spiritual energy there. In order to understand the Skinwalker's place in Navajo lore, one must understand that the Navajo people have a very rich and deep spirituality that incorporates various types of magic, with medicine men being able to harness spiritual powers in certain areas in order to heal and help their tribes. Unfortunately, as is the case of human nature at large, there are individuals who inevitably use these powers for selfish and harmful ends. These tribes members who choose to use the spiritual powers for evil are referred to as witches. These witches may inevitably choose to also go down the path of becoming a skinwalker, which grants them the ability to shape change into any animal they desire, among other sinister powers. The ritual to become a skinwalker includes the individual becoming inducted into a secret society of witches, and subsequently killing someone close to them, often a sibling, in order to complete the transformation. In Navajo culture, witchcraft is considered to be the ultimate antithesis to their moral beliefs and values, and those who practice witchcraft are considered to have forfeited their humanity, and as such their right to exist. According to their traditional laws, they believe that such an individual must be killed. Some other dark powers that are conferred to individuals who become skinwalkers include the ability to take control of the minds and bodies of individuals by locking eyes with them, as well as reading people's minds. Skinwalkers are also described as being able to influence and control creatures of the night, such as owls or wolves, who will then do their sinister bidding. They are also said to have powers that grant them the ability to afflict sickness and disease, as well as famine and general destruction. A hallmark of the Skinwalker is of course its ability to transform into animals. It will do so in order to utilize specific abilities such as speed and power of various types of creatures such as foxes or bears. These attributes are sometimes said to be augmented beyond that of the original animals. An example of this is seen in many modern reports of Skinwalker encounters, often involving folks driving down lonesome desert highways in the dead of night. All of a sudden, a mysterious quadrupedal creature will come out of the darkness and begin matching the car at high speeds. In some tales, the creature eventually seems to lose interest and veers off back into the night. And in others, the creature transforms into a human and slams on the hood of the car. One tale recounts how a man encountered a purported skinwalker whilst repairing his ranch home. During the repairs, he began to hear eerie, loud laughter emanating from some sheep pens nearby. The man had been under the impression that he was alone, and ventured toward the pens to ascertain the source of the laugh. Upon reaching the pen, he was greeted by the chilling sight of all the sheep but one huddled in a corner. The ram in question was standing upright on two legs and emanated the human laugh. The rancher locked eyes with the creature and noted that they did not bear resemblance to that of a sheep's, but indeed looked decidedly human. Afterwards, the ram simply returned to all fours and casually strolled away. This concept of being able to tell a skinwalker apart from its eyes seems to be rather common. It is said that while they are in the form of a human, their eyes are more animalistic, and when they are in the form of an animal, the opposite is true. Skinwalkers are also said to make their presence known around houses by knocking on doors, windows, and even outside walls during the night, and some have reported seeing them peering into the windows. Skinwalkers are an absolutely fascinating part of Navajo culture, and although there are many details that have been ascertained over the years about them, on the whole the Navajo people consider it taboo to speak about it amongst outsiders. So there is undoubtedly much we do not know about them. Even within the confines of this program, there are many things that I have not touched on, and I would encourage anyone interested in learning more about these entities, as well as Navajo folklore in general, to further research the subject. And perhaps beware the next time you are driving down a lonesome southwestern highway in the dead of night, lest you see something following you through the darkness. The previous two entities we have discussed in tonight's episode are specific creatures from the folklore of various cultures. Pale crawlers, on the other hand, have origins that are a bit murky, and this classification usually does not refer to a specific being. It would even be more apt to say that the term pale crawler is more of an umbrella phrase used to describe any such creature that falls into this general description. They are humanoid creatures, anywhere from 5 to 8 feet tall, and are often seen traversing on all fours, lending to their description as quote-unquote crawlers. They do not wear any clothing, and their skin is distinctively ashen or white, with most descriptions noting a lack of any kind of hair. Their mouths are usually purported to contain sharp teeth, although chillingly, some victims describe them as having no mouth at all, and are also said to have very sunken, hollow eyes. Thought to be nocturnal creatures, outdoor sightings are mostly reported to have occurred during the night, but that is not always the case. In most encounters, eyewitnesses have reported the creatures as running away, but some individuals have relayed stories of the cryptids as being rather aggressive. The proliferation of reports from eyewitnesses claiming to have encountered these entities can be traced back to a 4chan board in which many users collaborated on creating a description of a fictional monster around 2013. The description that was originally posted does differ slightly from what would eventually become commonplace. The creature was originally described as having no nose as well as no mouth, and had 3 green eyes, one in the middle of its forehead. This creature would eventually be featured in various creepypastas, and its name would be forever etched into the annals of paranormal media. The Rake. Although the Rake is a fictional creature, this has not stopped many individuals from coming forward with their own reports of encounters with pale humanoid crawlers, and whether or not you believe there is any truth to these claims is up to you. In any case, I would still like to relay some stories of supposed pale crawler sightings from some terrified eyewitnesses. This first set of purported encounters all come from an individual whose experiences were reported to the website phantomsandmonsters.com. This user, going simply by the moniker M, has this to say. I live in Wyoming, Michigan, about a walking distance away from Resurrection Cemetery. If you look it up on Google Maps, you will see it has a tree line surrounding it. The tree line closest to the woods is where I've seen it almost all times. I have multiple stories, but I'll try to share only the most haunting ones. The first encounter I had was with my sister. She was going to take a walk through the cemetery. It was late at night, and I had the gut instinct to go with her, so I did. We decided to play Pokemon Go, because why not? I didn't like the forested area around it, especially this big pine tree visible by a maintenance path that led to the crematorium. I was scared out of my mind, but we went towards the crematorium anyway to get a Pokestop and a Jigglypuff. We had to go so close that we were on the maintenance path, but the nicer cobblestoned half. It was when I looked to my right that I first saw it. Hunched over, it looked like a normal human being, but more terrifying. It appeared to have seen me too, because it stood up. I could tell it was tall. I'd estimate about 7 feet in height. I told my sister to run, and we ran home where I proceeded to pray in my room for a while. My mom had a sighting as well. She had mentioned seeing something gray hunched in the top of the pine tree I mentioned earlier, watching us. When she looked back, it was gone. Safe to say, we went home early that day. I consider myself slightly psychic, and when I closed my eyes, sometime around the time that she saw it, I saw 2 gaping holes staring back at me. My mom described the creature, and I recognized it as something I'd drawn a few weeks before. I burned this image, but have since redrawn it. My most recent sighting, and the one that kept me from going back to the cemetery, happened in broad daylight with a friend. I'll keep his name hidden for privacy, but we decided to go to said cemetery after class, which was a college program but for high school freshmen. We wandered around the cemetery for hours until my arm started hurting and I decided that we should go back home for a snack. As we walked, my anxiety heightened. I had told him about the crawler, but I suspected we wouldn't have to worry as it was daytime. As we were walking along the sidewalk, about to reach the tree line, I saw a dead squirrel/dog arm in the middle of the sidewalk. I looked up and I saw the crawler run straight into the tree line. It was gray and ran on all 4s rather than on 2 legs. I told my friend to run and he did. We both ran until we reached the intersection. Another eyewitness account of what some believe was a pale crawler was cataloged by the National Cryptid Society. The anonymous witness whose encounter occurred in Michigan City, Indiana, had this to say. It was the middle of summer. Heat lightning was flashing over the lake. Several friends and I were at this dude's beach house. It wasn't very late, maybe an hour or 2 after sunset. We all went outside onto the 2nd-story back deck to smoke. I was watching the lightning. The house was only a few hundred feet away from the shore, but the walk to the beach takes a minute because there's a grassy dune between it and the shore. So a couple of us noticed a light beam from a flashlight coming over the dune. It was scanning the grass, like they were walking around or possibly looking for something. Most people on the beach at night don't use lights. It's actually pretty bright all night on Lake Michigan after your eyes get used to it. The light sweeps by something in the grass, then it shines back onto it. What was illuminated was very strange. It appeared to be a naked guy crawling around on the grass, although it had elongated arms and legs. It was moving kind of fast, crunched over. It only lasted a few seconds, long enough for all of us to see it. Then, after the thing ran off, the flashlight shines directly at us. It stayed pointing at us until it went out after a few seconds. Creepy. So we're all like, what the heck was that? We asked what each other saw. We all saw a weird, stretched out, naked guy. I wanted to go down there. I wanted to see if we could find it, but no one would go, and they were creeped out and wanted to go back inside. I was very disappointed, but I wouldn't go alone. I still regret it. The only explainable thing it could have possibly been was a drunk, gangly, naked guy. But I don't think so because it looked abnormally stretched. The light pointed at us, and it freaked everyone out. It was something strange. I can't say what the height of it was accurately, but it didn't seem very big, maybe around 7 feet tall. My husband said it looked like something from a Marilyn Manson music video. These are just a small collection of stories communicated by individuals who claim to have encountered pale crawlers. As I mentioned earlier, it's up to you to decide the veracity of these claims. And the question remains, are these entities mere folklore spawned in the creepier corners of the internet, or is there some truth to sightings of feral human-like creatures that stalk rural and remote areas? And more importantly, are you willing to go hunting for the proof? Well, there you have it, folks. I sincerely hope you enjoyed our first episode, and tune out of this broadcast with a little more knowledge on some of the most ubiquitous legends in our modern paranormal lore. I can certainly say that whilst researching this episode, I learned a great deal of information about these creatures that I was not previously aware of. One important piece of knowledge to take away is that despite the fact that these three entities are often referred to interchangeably, they are indeed quite different. As I mentioned earlier, I would encourage you to do some digging of your own into these creatures, especially if you have a thirst for knowledge on these subjects. I also invite you to join me for our next broadcast, where we will explore the chilling phantom radio station, UVB 76, including theories behind its purpose and origins. This podcast is available on YouTube as well as Spotify, and to stay updated on our broadcasts, or to suggest topics for future episodes and share your personal paranormal or unexplained encounters that may be featured on an episode, check out our subreddit r/The Mystery Report, where I will also be notifying listeners of when episodes will drop. And keep an eye out as we begin to add more social media in an effort to stay connected to our audience. So tune in next time to The Mystery Report. This has been your host, Chance, and I'm signing off. And to those of you who are still listening, the real question is, did they get that Jigglypuff?